The voice told me back in, this was about 2014, middle of the year. He said there's 7 giant gold vaults in the world. The Bush family had been using one, and to their shock, much of their gold was rehypothecated. So that's one way they can lose their gold. And the other way they can lose their wealth is simply having accounts frozen. Like, some elite might have some very big accounts in Indian bank systems or in Hong Kong. And they get discovered, the real owners are found out, and they freeze the account. And before you know it, a third-level Rothschild has lost 80% of his money. Well, there are lots of ways to protect the money, and there are lots of ways to lose the money, but the most vulnerable money is paper wealth. But we just had a big laugh among our colleagues back in 2014, when the Bush family got rehypothecated. And the voice put it very simply: they weren't watching their gold closely enough because they're arrogant.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. We got a lot of. I think it's coming into view right now. Let's back up a little bit. After the Iran sanctions of 2012, Iran found a way. They found a loophole. You see, the Obama administration, they weren't very smart. They talked smart. They talked big. They tried to carry a big stick by, knocking down defenseless nations that don't really have an army, like in Syria, like in Libya, like in Yemen, like in Ukraine. But they're really a bunch of pussies, and they weren't very smart, because the Iranians found the loophole that the big national banks could receive payments and then do some swaps with their central bank, because the Obama administration morons just put the ban on the Iranian central bank. So Iran went out and arranged for oil sales with India. This is the model. Iran sells oil to India. India buys gold from Turkey. India delivers Turkish gold to Iran, all done through second-party big Iranian banks. Everybody's happy. No dollars in the transaction. So that was a giant FU to the United States, which is getting caught with doing a number of illegal things. That's what some of the fines are all about, that the United States does not like to talk about. But there's a big amount of money moving into Iranian hands from the U.S. government to pay for the fines, because many of the sanctions violated international law, which is not a big concern for the U.S. government, because we have full spectrum dominance. Okay, so the model was there with Iran, India, and Turkey. Now, step forward. You saw this 2 years ago. I made some calls back right after the Ukrainian war began. I said, watch the Russians sell oil and gas to China and not involve the dollar. And it later got a name in some of the press, like especially Zero Hedge, which is one of the most significant websites, I think, in the West for breaking great news and making great analysis. The point was that the Russians were selling China oil and gas and accepting RMB currency, the Chinese currency. And, gee, where did the Chinese find all this RMB currency? Well, they were redeeming their treasury bonds. They've been busy for 2 years redeeming their treasury bonds. They're buying Russian energy. Okay, then the big news came in April of last year that Shanghai was selling an RMB-based contract for physical delivery of gold. So there you have it. The Russians sell China oil, they accept RMB, they cash in their RMB and walk away with gold from Shanghai. That does not involve a third party. It instead involves the Shanghai market, which means the structural foundation for the gold trade note is now in place. Conduct your trade, take RMB, convert to gold in Shanghai. People might say, but Jim, that's always been there. No, it has not. You could not take your Saudi oil, pay for it in treasury bills, and go to London to convert to gold. They would tell you to go, go shit in your hand. But in Shanghai, the RMB can be converted to gold, and take a look at some of the statistics, and you see Russia is buying more gold every single month from Shanghai. They're converting their oil sales, and I think there's some LNG and natural gas sales in there, but China is predominantly oil, and they're building pipelines, and the Russians are accepting RMB for pipeline construction as well. So it's not just the oil trade, it's the oil infrastructure as well. And I think we're going to see formalized soon a single contract called the gold trade note that will involve RMB in commercial trade payment, like, say, for Saudi oil or UAE oil, by China or by Japan or by South Korea or by Indonesia. But this is the structure of the gold trade note coming into view by virtue of Russian oil sales with China and RMB conversion in Shanghai to gold. There it is. The Shanghai contract is for RMB. And there's going to be, I think, a heavy discounting coming for treasury bonds as they're being dumped. You see a lot of central banks discharging their treasury bonds, and it shows up in the tick data. I think those are redeemed at 100 cents on the dollar. But there's a lot more that's not being redeemed for 100 cents on the dollar. It's from big banks trying to get rid of theirs that are not central banks. So this is the end of the petrodollar with a rise on the same scorched earth, a rise of the Petro yuan, the Petro RMB. Okay, the gold trade note, it's almost by definition, it's by, like, what's the word, expedience. The gold trade note is going to come from oil sales because oil trade is the biggest commodity in volume in the world. As the petrodollar is gone, the Petro RMB is going to come in oil sales to replace the petrodollar. Yes. And it needs its formalized structure. What was the formalized structure before? Well, the OPEC nations led by the Saudis would sell oil, take treasury bonds, and stuff them in a trunk and not convert them. It was called the petrodollar recycle, the Arab oil surplus recycling program. They left them in treasury bonds and never converted them out of dollars. But the Russians and Chinese are converting to gold. So we've got the basis of the gold trade note. It's going to happen, I think, when the formalized oil trade gets its structure. And Shanghai is critical. I smelled this last April, and I've been waiting and waiting to see when are we going to have a much bigger volume in Shanghai. When is it going to involve the oil trade? Because I've known for 2.5, 3 years that the petrodollar was being dismantled ever since mid-2014. The question of when's the petrodollar going to go away, that's not a good question. It's how long has it been in process of being dismantled? Yes, we're already seeing fireworks. It's called the Yemen War. The United States has basically said to the Saudis, you can dump your treasuries all you want, but, you got to buy a lot of military equipment. And, hey, look, maybe you have a good war.
Gosh, so does
you
Trump...
You can buy our phosphorus bombs, and you can bomb the hospitals, and don't worry about war crimes because we control the United Nations, and the Saudis went and bribed the head of the United Nations not to be charged with war crimes in Yemen.
And that was
this is very convoluted. Well, notice that there was some reports a couple weeks ago that Trump is backing out of the United States participation in the United Nations.
Yes.
That could have something to do with the Saudis and their war crimes. Don't know. Don't know. We're not told the detail. We mere unwashed mortals are not told the details. We're nothing but vassals. But we can object and we can fight by joining the gold bandwagon. Mm-hmm. There is a White Dragon global initiative. It's not the harmonious world, or could be related, I don't really know. It's not the debt jubilee. It's more like the Patriarch Kirill from Russia, from the Eastern Orthodox Church, meeting with the Pope, which is the center of the Western Satanism, and saying we need to start doing good things for planet Earth. We need to respect the Earth's integrity, and we need to stop the bank fraud. We need to put out of business the Western elite bankers that are bankrupting the world and who have largely destroyed the global economy. This is a result of 40 years of fascism. It's a staged process. But there are many Western elite players, and we're not talking about just the 3 or 4 top people. I'm talking about the 200 second and third level people who are running big banking systems and who give the orders for certain national politicians with their puppet strings. The Voice is on top of this, and he told me back in late 2015, I remember because I just remember where I was living and what office I was operating out of. He told me that something like 90% of the Western elite have signed on to this global positive initiative to protect the planet Earth and to bring about sound money and restore the global economy. About 90% had signed on. And the holdouts were the upper-level Rothschild, upper-level Rockefeller, and upper-level Bush. And I said, well, what about Clinton's? And he said, don't worry about them. They're going to be dead before long. Mm-hmm. And this was over a year ago.
Wow.
And I said, wait a minute. Be dead? What do you mean? Bill Clinton is going to get rubbed out? And he said, no, he's very sick. It'll become clear in another year.
Bad.
He looks like he's drooling. And you could always say he must be looking at some fine-looking 38-year-old woman walking down the aisle, but I think he's just drooling because his brain's messed up. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I don't want to get into Bill Clinton, but it was interesting that he said over a year ago that Bill and Hillary Clinton will not be factors. And I said, you think Hillary's going to run for president? He said, yeah, but don't expect her to win. The Voice has got very good internal connections. It's not just in finance, banking, and gold. It's a very good connection. The gold power centers have very good intel, and that's an important point. So I think we've got a good deal of the main crime families of Rothschild, Rockefeller, Bush. The Clinton family is within the Bush family. Mm-hmm. They worked hand in glove when Clinton was governor, and the Mena Air Force Base was used to move cocaine, and that cocaine went straight to Panama or from Panama. The money went back to Panama for their banking system. Panama is an interesting place. It gets loaded with all kinds of good stuff and bad stuff. I like to think of Panama as having 3 elements. It's got all the South American legitimate. It's got the North American and the Latin American drug money, and it's got the local Panamanian canal income, which is about $9 billion a year. Now just multiply that by 100 to make it per capita equal to the United States, because they've got 3+ million, we have 300.
Wow.
So they have $9 billion a year. Call it $900 billion a year. That's significant.
It's incredible.
But they've also got a lot of mining for a little country. And evidence of that is they've got 86 million pounds of copper plates.
Wow.
That they had intentions to put together with their 250 tons of gold to make a South American dollar. I'm sorry, Central American dollar. Now, if you don't think 250 tons is a lot, multiply it by 100. So you get 250, you get 2,500, you get 25,000 tons per capita equivalent.
That's a lot of gold.
That's a lot of gold for little Panama, and Panama had intentions of becoming the gold lease agent and center for the gold-backed Central American dollar for Latin American trade, like the gold trade note using Panamanian gold, and maybe they'd bring in other gold, like say from Brazil or from Bolivia or from Peru. The Andes is loaded with gold.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so anyway, the movement is well afoot, well in progress for converting much of the global elite. And notice that in Davos, they had a real shitty barbecue this year. They had so much internal angst that they were actually questioning themselves.
Wow.
As to whether they were the problem. Well, notice, my big complaint about Davos is they call it an economic forum, but I think you could count the number of CEOs at the forum on less than your 10 fingers. Big financial funds, it's central bankers, and the elite bankers like, Wall Street and London, and throw in some European bigwig elites. But, gee, in, what was it, September last year, was there the St. Petersburg Economic Forum hosted by Putin with something like 270 CEOs from companies? That's an economic forum.
Yeah.
What you have in Davos is a central banker barbecue.